Imagine someone sending you a doll meant to look like you with a cut throat, something literally out of a horror movie. In this story, you are going to hear and see it all. Vicious, relentless harassment that turned the lives of two women upside down. I'm Olivia LaVoice, the creator and host of the Bakersfield Three podcast. I've teamed up with Casey from Casefile to bring you some of their most memorable cases in a visual format. Today's story is based on case number 189. It was a crisp Monday morning in 1994. As the school week was about to begin, faculty at the Coolbaugh Learning Centre facility in Pennsylvania were expecting students to arrive any minute, when suddenly a teacher noticed a handful of envelopes scattered on the floor near the front entrance. They were addressed to the school principal. Shortly after, faculty noticed more envelopes thrown haphazardly around the campus, on the lawn, the bushes, and pathways. The letters had no stamp or return address, and inside each envelope was a copy of the same typed letter. It was littered with profanities and grammatical errors, and it was essentially a scathing rant about one of the teachers, going on about what a terrible educator she was. It also claimed that this teacher brought cannabis to school and, quote, showed it in the faculty room just like it was a big joke. The principal immediately called the teacher that the letters were about. Her name was JoAnne Chambers. JoAnne had been a first grade teacher at the school for 4 years. She had an immaculate record and was generally known to be an incredible teacher, which made the letters about her all the more surprising. JoAnne was stunned when she read the letter, and given how it focused on her teaching skills, she assumed it was another staff member or parent of a student. But she couldn't imagine who it would be. Everyone at the school and all the parents seemed to love her. JoAnne was known for her unconventional methods of teaching, which involved singing and dancing to make her lessons more interactive and fun for her young students. Other teachers at the school seemed to really like this about her. But clearly, whoever wrote that letter did not. JoAnne tried to shrug it off and hoped it was just a cruel prank, a one-off. But it wasn't. The letters kept coming over the next few weeks. And one letter was shoved into the all faculty members' mail slots that accused JoAnne of being an alcoholic and drinking in her classroom. Shortly after, JoAnne opened her desk drawer one day to find an empty bottle of liquor, and she noticed the framed photo she always kept in her drawer of her and her son was missing. Whoever had it out for JoAnne was making her life at school pretty unpleasant, but soon it was affecting her at home as well. She started getting incessant hang-up phone calls and harassing letters delivered to her doorstep. And the letters were escalating to threats. One read, quote, "I can get you in one try. No one will ever prove it. They may not think so, but I'm smarter than all of you, you stupid bitch." Another letter threatened to poison JoAnne, saying, quote, "You really are a clueless bitch. I had 4 chances to drug your coffee this week. Or did I drug your coffee? Bitch, you make me sick." And then things got nasty. JoAnne sat down at her desk in her classroom one afternoon, and when she got up, she rubbed her hands on the back of her dress and soon found feces had been smeared all over her chair. This prompted JoAnne to go to the police. She filled them in on all the letters and the apparent theft of the photo of her and her son. She also told them that in addition to the letters sent to other faculty and some parents, there had been a photo taped on a local storefront that was pornographic. Specifically, it was 3 women in a bathtub together, and JoAnne's face had been cut out from the photo of her and her son and taped on one of the women's bodies. Written on top were the words, "It's not over, you die." The police chief agreed with JoAnne that it was likely someone in the school system behind this. A hidden camera was placed in her classroom to try to catch the culprit red-handed, and some of the letters were sent to the FBI for analysis. They were able to extract a partial print from a couple of the envelopes, but not enough for a profile for comparison. All the faculty at the school were called into a meeting and told about the investigation in hopes that if one of them were behind it, they'd be scared into stopping. Now, when the chief of police analyzed the footage from the hidden camera in JoAnne's classroom, he noticed something interesting. One day, JoAnne was seen speaking with another teacher before class was about to begin. The two of them then both left the classroom together. And moments later, the other teacher came back and grabbed something off of JoAnne's desk and walked out with it. It was another first grade teacher, Paula Nawrocki, and she had taken JoAnne's coffee cup. Paula had been with the school district for 20 years. She was well respected within the school, but she and JoAnne were quite different, and this was something that faculty had noticed. While JoAnne liked to think outside the box with her teaching style, Paula was much more by the book. And while both teachers seemed to be adored by their students and the parents, a few staff members suspected that Paula might be jealous of JoAnne's reputation as a fun teacher. As reported in the newspaper, the Times-Tribune, there was another reason some felt Paula looked suspicious. In one of the letters about JoAnne, there was a reference to the school superintendent, to be clear, not JoAnne, and his resemblance to a German commander on the TV show Hogan's Heroes. An employee immediately remembered a conversation where Paula made this exact comparison. But when questioned, Paula was adamant she had nothing to do with any of it. And with no direct evidence against her, she was able to keep her job at the school. But the damage was pretty much done. Most of the other teachers wanted Paula to stay far away from them, and she was moved into a different building. Meanwhile, JoAnne was transferred to a new school entirely for her safety, as law enforcement continued to investigate. Police's next order of business was to ask Paula to do a polygraph test. They also asked JoAnne to do one just so they could rule out the possibility that JoAnne had potentially exaggerated any of the reported incidents. JoAnne passed with flying colors, but Paula did not. When flat out asked if she was involved in the making or sending any of the threatening letters, Paula said no. And to that, the polygraph examiner said that answer was deceptive. When told she failed, Paula maintained her innocence, but she did say something to the police chief, apparently, along the lines of, "I don't think I'm doing it. If I am, I don't know." He told Paula she was the prime suspect and it was in her best interest to fess up, to which she supposedly responded, "You'll never prove it was me." Of course, none of this is recorded, unfortunately. Anyhow, the failed polygraph and the weird comments to the chief were not concrete enough to file charges. But police did get a search warrant and seized numerous items of stationery and a typewriter from her home, and again, she was their prime suspect. And then things in this case turned up a notch. JoAnne was leaving work after a particularly long school day when she reached her hand under the car door handle and she jumped back in searing pain. A razor blade had been placed under the handle and cut her finger. A few days later, a letter was dropped off at her door that said, quote, "You're sliced." But the next incident is undoubtedly the most chilling. This time around, JoAnne received a package at her school. It was a small box wrapped in pink paper, and inside was a Barbie wearing a blue dress similar to one that JoAnne often wore. The Barbie's hair was cut to look similar to JoAnne's, and then lodged inside the doll's throat was a razor blade with red paint. But there was a short time of relief for JoAnne after this. A few months went by without any new threats. But then JoAnne was traveling down the highway on her usual route when she noticed a car out of her rearview mirror that was rapidly speeding up behind her. It pulled up next to her before rapidly swerving, which caused JoAnne to go off the road. JoAnne instantly recognized the driver as Paula. JoAnne later described this encounter in the series Medical Detectives, saying, quote, "Paula's looking right at me. I will never forget that look.
She's looking right at me. I will never forget that look. Never. I will never forget it. She looked right at me.
After this, the district attorney's office felt they had enough evidence to make a case against Paula. She was arrested during a lesson in front of her first grade class and charged with reckless endangerment, 78 counts of stalking, 24 counts of making terroristic threats, and 2 counts of assault. Paula's husband immediately hired a private investigator to try to exonerate his wife. And apparently, it was Paula's idea to test the letters that were sent to JoAnne and to the school for DNA, which I think is pretty impressive because keep in mind, it was only 1995, so DNA was something most people at that time either didn't know about yet or didn't really understand. Anyhow, Paula also coughed up the $7,000 to do these tests. She was very confident in them, apparently. A private lab got to work and lifted a profile from saliva that was used to close the letters. And as it turned out, the DNA was not a match to Paula. Now the PI had to figure out whose DNA was it. On a hunch, the PI, named James Anderson, went to JoAnne Chambers' home and noticed her trash can conveniently next to the curb. Anderson pulled out a few tissues and an ear swab and went on his way. The lab told the private investigator that they pulled a male DNA sample and a female sample from the letters. The female sample was determined to be none other than JoAnne Chambers. The PI believed the male sample was most likely that of JoAnne's husband or her son. Really wish we had a conclusive answer on that, but anyhow. After this development, Paula's defense attorney argued that the case against her should be dropped immediately, but the judge denied that request. When confronted about the DNA results, JoAnne Chambers seemed unfazed. She said she wasn't surprised given she'd handled the letters. She even voluntarily submitted more of her DNA for further testing to be done. When it was explained to her that her saliva was found to be on one of the stamps on one of the letters, JoAnne said that was because she was handling one of the letters and a stamp fell off, and without putting much thought into it, she said she quickly tried to put it back on, first using her spit. JoAnne explained that that didn't work though, so she ended up using a glue stick to secure the stamp. And that was that. The trial against Paula Nawrocki went ahead as scheduled. If Paula were to be found guilty, she faced up to 5 years in jail and a $10,000 fine for each count. That's quite a lot. Paula ended up taking the stand in her own defense, something fairly uncommon for defendants to do. Paula told the jury that she believed JoAnne was harassing herself and, of course, trying to frame her, and that she was doing it all for attention. When questioned about why Paula was seen on the hidden camera grabbing JoAnne's coffee cup, Paula said it was JoAnne who asked her to go back and grab it for her. She also testified that her comments to the police chief, the one along the lines of, "You'll never prove it was me," had been taken way out of context. Furthermore, it was determined during the trial that while Paula failed her polygraph test and JoAnne passed hers, Paula's test was apparently much more rigorous and considered pretty different from JoAnne's, which I think is interesting. What's also pretty interesting is a chemist took the stand and discredited a seemingly small comment JoAnne had made when confronted about the DNA. See, remember JoAnne said at first she tried to get a stamp that fell off a letter back on by using her spit, but then it didn't work, so she used a glue stick. Well, the chemist said had glue been used, they'd be able to tell. And when they looked for traces of it, they found none. So it appeared that JoAnne was lying about that, which it's a weird thing to lie about, right? It's really an irrelevant detail, but it is a lie nonetheless. After that testimony, it was JoAnne's turn to get on the witness stand. Reporters from the Morning Call newspaper referred to her testimony as uneven and that it ranged from testy to sarcastic. And then things got really interesting. The principal at a school that JoAnne had worked for many years earlier told the jury about a day when JoAnne asked to go home because she said she had sat in feces. Remember, this is something that JoAnne's supposed harasser had recently done to her. And then more faculty from JoAnne's early career in education spoke up. Paula's private investigator had found one witness in particular who described being called into a meeting at one point over a decade ago, where she and several other teachers were told that JoAnne had been receiving harassing phone calls and threats that her house would be burned down. The witness said she believed JoAnne was purposely trying to get her and the other teachers in trouble, and that after that, they stayed far away from her. PI James Anderson listed 16 incidents where JoAnne reported anonymous threats against her to authorities.
Every crime that she's been a victim of has some weirdness attached to it.
Prior to the incidents that Paula was now accused of being involved in. Paula's defense team also told the jury that the only witness to Paula allegedly trying to run JoAnne off the road was JoAnne herself. When it was time to deliberate, the jury took less than 2 hours. They acquitted Paula on all charges, and jury members even hugged Paula after the verdict, while JoAnne reportedly quickly slipped out of the courtroom. Soon after, though, Paula had to undergo another hearing. This time, it was done by the school board, and while in the end it was determined that Paula could keep her teaching job, so could JoAnne. The two were to remain teaching within the same district. In November 2000, Paula received a $600,000 settlement from the school district. She was also awarded a $25,000 settlement from JoAnne Chambers in a lawsuit seeking compensation for the money that Paula spent on her defense for the criminal trial. In the end, both Paula and JoAnne remained teachers within the same district with lengthy and successful careers. However, Paula said she still did have to deal with some fallout from the allegations against her, with some people still thinking she probably really did do it. Now, JoAnne retired from her teaching career in 2014 as a celebrated educator. Over the years, she obtained the prestigious status of a National Board certified teacher and helped hundreds of students with dyslexia learn how to read. It was never proven that JoAnne was behind the letters, and the case technically remains unsolved. I would really love to hear what you guys think about this one in the comments. Thank you all for watching. Until next time.